I have a Chinese card that allows me to live in China without any visas. And I remember feeling so out of place because I'm like, I don't understand this. I'm the only foreigner Chinese here.
Yeah.
But they would be like, I'm sorry, you were born and raised, you have to speak it. I did have a huge identity crisis because I was like, I don't really know where I belong.
Can you imagine what it would be like to be born and raised in a country where nobody looks like you, shares your culture, or even speak your own language? Well, today we're gonna listen to a very interesting story about an Indian girl who was born and raised as a Chinese citizen in Hong Kong. And trust me when I say that this is one of the most particular stories that I have ever listened to. So remember to subscribe to Wentigram in order to support this kind of content, and let's roll the video. Pues nuestra primera entrevistada del día de hoy es un caso muy interesante porque aunque ustedes no lo crean, ella es china, o bueno, a lo mejor a sus ojos ella no se siente china. So today we are here with Jenica, and she's actually Chinese in a way, maybe not. We should ask you, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jenica. My ethnicity is actually Indian, but I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I have a Hong Kong passport, so I do consider myself to be Chinese to an extent. Yeah.
So in a way you would be Chinese, right?
Yeah, and if people were to ask me about my identity, I would say I do connect with the Indian culture, but also I do connect with the Chinese culture because I spent my whole life there, and so I had a lot of Chinese friends. Growing up, I was eating in the Chinese restaurants. I enjoyed Chinese food just as much as I enjoy Indian food. So. Yeah.
Yeah, but in a way, Hong Kong is not like the mainland, right? It's very different.
Very
different. Things in Hong Kong is not the same as in the mainland. So why did you choose to come to China mainland?
Yeah, I think that I wanted to also experience something a little bit different. Hong Kong is very intercultural, very cultural, multicultural is what I meant. But yeah, just so many people from everywhere. So you can't really feel Chinese, like the Chinese culture so much. But when you come into China, it's where you really understand and realize what the culture is all about. You walk around the streets, there's words in Chinese. In Hong Kong, everything is in English. I got around living in Hong Kong my whole life speaking English, and so I think I wanted to learn a bit more about the culture. It's also really expensive to live in Hong Kong. So most people, they stay with their families until they get married and then they stay with their partners. Whereas in China, price-wise, it is much more affordable. You can stay on your own and you can have that sort of independence as well. So I think that was something that was really important for me.
And were you, before, were you thinking about moving to China, or did you think about other places in the world?
Yeah.
What's the thing that you would actually say that made you choose to come to China instead of other parts?
One thing that really helped was that I didn't need visa. The Hong Kong passport is technically Chinese. I have a Chinese card that allows me to live in China without any visa. So that helped significantly with jobs. But also, secondly, I traveled here a year before and I experienced a life and I was like, I can imagine myself living here. You have really beautiful vibe. You have a very mixed culture of people. You have a huge expat community here. I'd also known people that had lived here before and they'd all been talking about Shanghai as being a really amazing place. So I was like, let's give it a shot. So I applied and I got a job really quick. And so for me, it was more just, I got a job. I don't have to have a visa. I can move in quite seamlessly. And so I did it and been here since 4 years.
When you came here, do Chinese people see you as one of theirs? Because in the mainland, people think that Hong Kong is completely Chinese,
Yeah.
They would call Hong Kong people Chinese people. What was it like to grow as an Indian background, but in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
And then what is it like to be in the mainland with a Hong Kong passport?
It's interesting because I'll start off with when I was in Hong Kong. I was always treated like a foreigner in Hong Kong until I told people that I have a Hong Kong passport. And then suddenly they'd be like, oh, so you're Chinese. And then they'd start speaking to me in Chinese. But I did have a huge identity crisis because I was like, I don't really know where I belong. When I would go back to India, I was treated like a foreigner there too. It was very obvious that I was not local. And then I would be in Hong Kong and I would be treated like a foreigner. People would switch to speaking English and, treat me in that way. Moving to China, it's a little bit easier for me to be that expat because I am on an expat package here. So it's weird because I don't need a visa, but I'm still treated as an expat. I guess I get the best of both worlds in terms of with the pay, the packages, I'm treated like an expat, but I also don't have to worry about, those other things. And here, I think I just right off the bat made friends with expats. So I never really saw what it was like to be fully Chinese over here.
Yeah.
I have the occasional few Chinese friends, but I think that the Chinese culture here is much more closed. I didn't study in a university here, so all of my friends are mostly expats. Whereas in Hong Kong, I still was exposed to some Chinese because of the university that I went to. So they took me to the local yum cha, tai pai tong, like, the local restaurants.
Yeah.
So I got a snippet of that. But yeah, where do I fit in? What is my identity? That's something I'm still
So
figuring out.
would you say that you feel maybe more comfortable amongst foreigners and expats than you would with Chinese or even Hong Kong people, like Hong Kong Chinese people?
Yeah,
Of
yeah,
course.
for sure. I went to an international school in Hong Kong. We did not learn Chinese there either.
So what is your mother language then?
English.
English.
Yeah.
So that is what you grew up with, like even with your family in school, you would speak mostly English?
English.
And then what about Chinese, like Mandarin Chinese or Cantonese? Can you speak those?
I can speak enough to get around. In Hong Kong, you don't really need to speak Cantonese unless you're speaking to the taxi driver or, you're at a local restaurant, a small family-owned restaurant where you need to speak Cantonese. So I learned whatever I needed to within that capacity. But beyond that, if you would ask me to speak like business Chinese, no.
What about the passport? Because me, as a foreigner, I have a very long name and that's like sometimes really a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So what about your passport? Like, do you have a Chinese name or is it a foreign name or an Indian name?
Yeah, I have a Chinese name. I have also my English name, but also my Chinese name. I don't have an Indian name.
Yeah.
There's no such thing like that for me. But yeah, I do have a Chinese name. It's unique.
Like Stone.
Yeah, basically.
Do your parents speak Chinese?
My dad, he speaks fluent Cantonese, not Mandarin.
But was he born in Hong Kong also?
So he was born in India, but he moved to Hong Kong with his family when he was like 3 years old. Now, the difference is my dad went to a local school in Hong Kong, like public school.
Yeah.
Right? I went to an international school.
So what's the language in public schools in Hong Kong?
Cantonese.
Cantonese.
Have to speak Cantonese there.
And what about now that it's like become more and more part of the mainland? Is it changing? Like, is the language changing?
Definitely.
Has it changed yet? Or is it still Cantonese and soon to become Mandarin? What's it like?
So this is a bit of a controversial topic right now because yes, Cantonese is still the main language in Hong Kong. They have now started to implement learning Mandarin as a compulsory language in schools. But I can say the last time I went to Hong Kong, I was switching between Cantonese and Mandarin because I'm not fluent with either, but I've been using Mandarin here a lot more. So when I go to Hong Kong and I would speak a bit of Mandarin, I was immediately cut off. Like, nope, we don't want to engage. And so I try to speak Cantonese. I try to go back to Cantonese as much as I can because that's the only time I'll get responded. It's very weird because I identify more as a Hong Kong Chinese than a Mandarin, like mainland Chinese. But now the treatment towards me even is like, you're a mainland because you're speaking Mandarin.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And what was it like growing up without like really speaking the language from where you were born?
I think because I don't look Chinese, automatically people would speak to me in English. Automatically. I would be the one to speak in Cantonese. No. They講中文啦, like, in Cantonese, like speak in Chinese with me. And so they'd be like, oh, wow, you can speak. And they would be surprised that I could even speak a little bit. But that was my attempt at learning because I never took classes. But again, when I would tell them, hi, 香港人, that means I am a Hong Kong person. They'd be like, what? Okay. And then they would start speaking in Cantonese. I remember when I went to my first job in Hong Kong, I was working at a hotel, a Hyatt hotel, and it was more of a local one. Their meetings, their staff meetings, they used to have everyday daily meetings. It would be in Cantonese.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling so out of place because I'd be like, I don't understand this. I'm the only foreigner Chinese here.
Yeah.
But they would be like, I'm sorry, you were born and raised. You have to speak it. And so I started to pick up. I would sit there in the meetings and I would ask my colleague, what are they saying? What are they saying? And started to kind of pick up a little bit more in the process. But yeah, not to that point of fluency.
Yeah,
But anyway.
that is very interesting. And did you at any point feel like discriminated against? Like, I mean, you not looking like the local people. I guess there at some point that you might feel left out from some situations. Did it ever?
Oh, definitely. I remember when I was in university, 95% of my friends were Chinese. And, I know they were trying to show me around to the local places and stuff. But naturally, the conversation would be in Chinese between each other, and I would be the only foreigner. But I was always really like, tell me, what do you say? What did you say? Why are you laughing? What's so funny? And so I tried to fit myself. And so I think in that process, they wanted to learn English. So they used to come to me a lot because all our exams and assignments were in English. So they would come to me for that. However, when it came down to hanging out and going to the bar and chilling, there would be that awkward sort of okay, I don't understand. So a lot of the times I would sit there with them and they would be speaking in Chinese and I would be like... yeah, but it was fun. It was fun regardless. They were very open to it as long as I was forward. And that was something I learned in the process. You are going to stick out like a sore thumb, whether you want to or not. It's up to you to to change the scenario for yourself.
You just mentioned that a lot of people will come to you to practice English.
Oh.
And I think it's like very known that a lot of foreigners that are in China teach English because that's one of the few jobs that you can actually do as a foreigner. But you, having had an education in Hong Kong, you have the proper passport to find a job in China. So what is it that you do here in the mainland?
So initially I came in, I studied hospitality management in university. So I come from that background. I worked in several hotels for many years in Hong Kong, but I'd always been building my career towards being an educator. I knew I always wanted to be an educator. And for me, I wanted to be in tertiary education. So teaching university, college level. So for me, that was a huge thing because in Hong Kong, you need to have at least a PhD to be able to teach in a university. But I was like, I just want to see if this is the field for me. So I applied to La Roche in China, which is a Swiss-based hospitality management college. And I got the offer. They flew me down. I did an interview. I did a demo class. And then I got the offer. So I was like, I have to just see whether this is it for me. So that was what I did for about 2 years. And then at some point, I guess through a lot of conversations and understanding like the way that it works over here, at some point you have to do your PhD, you have to do research. And I started looking into education for other ages, other age groups. And in the process, I decided to do my PGCE, and now I'm teaching younger kids, and I love it.
So you have a PhD?
A PGCE.
PGCE.
Yeah. So it's a postgraduate diploma in education.
Okay.
Yeah. So it qualifies you to teach in primary schools all around the world.
Where would you say the job opportunities are better, in Hong Kong or in the mainland?
Both. They're fantastic job opportunities, both here in Hong Kong. So I definitely do think at some point, my family is in Hong Kong, my friends are there as well. So, I'm always open to potentially going back.
How is it like meeting people here in China, meeting new friends, hanging out with people? What's been your experience with that?
I think that I was very lucky. I was very nervous about this. This is the first time that I've lived outside of home, outside of Hong Kong. So I was a bit nervous. I've had experience traveling for several months at a time. I went to Europe for a couple of months on my own and made friends there. And I think over the course, I think of being a person that doesn't fit in anywhere, you learn how to fit in everywhere. So I've been one of those people that sort of slips under the radar, but I just make friends from everywhere, like little pieces. And I think coming to China, I just put that into action. So when I started out, I made my first group of friends at my workplace. And then from there, I looked into volunteering opportunities. I've always been into volunteering from childhood. And there's this company over here that I started volunteering with, and I made another group of really close girlfriends there and just spread my wings that way. So I've got friends from everywhere, from different groups. And my current workplace, I've got another group of friends there too. And so it's been okay. You know what? I think that it is easier to make friends here to an extent than in Hong Kong. Because over here, you build a community based on interest groups. So I'm really into chess, for example. And if I wanted to find people that are into the same interests, I could make friends joining a chess community or a chess group. If I'm into paddling or something, there's just a group for everyone. Yeah. There's pockets of people for everyone. And so it's just about finding the one that's for you.
What about dating? Because dating is a completely different game.
Yeah.
One thing is to meet friends, but the other one is just to go out on a date.
Yeah.
Someone that is not your culture, someone that maybe doesn't really share the same core values that you may have.
Yeah.
So what's been your experience with dating, and what's the best way to meet someone in that aspect?
I've always been a proponent for organic dating. I mean, I know in the age of 2023, especially with COVID, these dating apps have become rampant. There's a lot of people, friends of mine as well, that I know that talk about dating apps. And I just don't know how much that stuff works. I've tried the dating apps here, and I don't know, maybe people already go in it with knowing exactly what they want. So then it's just about checking those boxes. And that's really not worked for me.
Is it like Tinder? Those dating apps?
Yeah, Tinder, Coffee Meets Bagel, Bumble, all of those apps, right? So I think everyone goes in already knowing what they want. And then it's do you check the boxes? If so, then we can talk about a second date.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel so organic. So I don't know, for me, I think meeting someone organically, either just at a party, through friends, through work, these kind of things have always been more successful for me. Again, when it comes to culture though, I don't fit in any culture. So I think again, I understand a human on a human level. And this is sort of, again, where my podcast comes in, because it's it doesn't matter where you're from. It's just who you are. What are your experiences? What do we have in common? And you'll find that you have something in common with anyone and everyone. all it just takes is getting into that conversation and digging a little bit deeper. And yeah, it kind of falls into place, I think. I've had friends who've come up with told me all kinds of weird stories. So, I think in Shanghai, a lot of the expats are here. They know they're only here temporarily. They know they're going to leave after some years. And so are they looking for something serious? Are they looking for, something long-term? That can be really hard to gauge, in the dating world.
Of course, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, You never know if somebody's here just for the short term. Even also with friends, you never know when somebody's going to leave. But I guess, as you said, and you have a really interesting podcast. Because, when you live abroad, you meet so many different people with interesting stories and backgrounds. So I guess what you're doing is, and I really like it. You should all go and listen to the podcast. I'm going to leave a link right here.
Yeah.
And lastly, what are your views on marriage? Chinese people have this really traditional way of thinking in which they think marriage is one of the biggest goals there is in life.
Yeah.
But you being born in China, but also having this Indian background, you may have a different perspective, or is it a shared?
I think if anything, it's just been amplified because the Indian culture is also very much about marriage. For them, it's you from a young age as a girl, you are kind of conditioned to think that marriage is the milestone that you've got to hit. Once you're of a certain age, you are of marriageable age, you are of age for kids, you are of age. And I think I was conditioned very much to think that way because that's just how our community is, right? We were just taught that that's how it's meant to be. But I think living on my own has definitely got me to stop in my tracks and to think, is that really the thing for me? Not that I'm against it. I definitely do think there's a part of me that still wants marriage, but I think it's for different reasons now. It's not about hitting that milestone. And the moment that I let go of that idea of I need to get married by this age, I have started now to be more open to finding the right person for me and not just the person who's willing to get married to me as soon as possible. And it's the same for Chinese. Honestly, I've spoken to friends of mine in Hong Kong, in China, and it has always been this tunnel vision of we're headed towards marriage. Even when it comes to dating, it's one of the first few questions they ask is, how much money do you have in your bank account? What can you provide me? And, a lot of my friends that are non-Indian, male friends, female friends, for them, it's hold on, we're on our first date. So yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm very much on both sides. I see both sides.
Do you think there will be a way in which you marry a Chinese guy, or is the culture too different? Would it be possible? What do you think, dating with Chinese guys?
I'll be honest, I have not had many experiences dating Chinese guys per se. I have had experiences dating non-Indians, and I connect with them just as fine, just as well. But Chinese, I've never gotten serious enough to be able to understand or integrate into their culture, to that level of intimacy. But I think if I did get into it, I think I could be okay.
It could be possible.
It could very much be possible. One of my cousins, she's again Indian as well, born and raised, but she is also Chinese, same like me. But she went to a public school, government school. So she's very much more Chinese than me. And she's been in a relationship with a Chinese guy for over 6 years now. And, they're talking about marriage and everything. So it's great.
Because 6 years is long, they're not getting married in both cultures, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jenica. Very interesting conversation. Chéquense el podcast que les voy a dejar en el link. Está bien interesante con historias de asesinatos, de secuestros, historias muy locochonas. Entonces, chéquenselo, no se lo pierdan y nos vemos en el próximo video.